Okay. Is it recording? Okay. Toda. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. Tonight, I will discuss shopping on doing our shopping on Shmita. Last week we discussed gardening. There will be a shiur at the very end where I'm going to summarize everything that we saw. So I'm going to discuss shopping and the different options. The option I'm not going to discuss today, because we will have a whole talk dedicated to, will be heter mechira. That will be our subject next week. So what is the problem buying fruits and vegetables on Shmita? Okay, the Torah tells us we're not allowed to work our land on Shmita. The Torah tells us that the produce is holy, but it doesn't, where does it say we're not supposed to buy anything on Shmita? Okay, so we treat it as holy and then it will be fine. What's the problem? So there seems to be a few problems with the produce of Shmita. Let's go through possible problems and see what out of these possible problems are actual problems. So the first possible problem is what is called shul. The Torah told us we have to let go and allow everyone to take our produce on Shmita. So that is incumbent upon the farmers to do. So if they didn't do that, if instead they took it and they took it to themselves and they harvested it, again, the Torah told us you're not allowed to harvest it, but they did, and they sent it to the stores. So first of all, they kept it to themselves. That's called shamul. They didn't relinquish their ownership. They didn't allow everyone to take it. So it could be that if someone did not fulfill their obligation towards the produce, it becomes non-kosher produce and we're not allowed to eat it. Perhaps. That is one possible problem. Another possible problem is they actually worked the land, perhaps, maybe, on Shmita. Maybe it was even planted on Shmita, these produce. Planted for sure, harvested, taken care of, sold. All of these were done during the Shmita. Maybe that also makes it prohibited. So that's called ne'evad. It was worked on during the Shmita. So these two things are, according to some of the Rishonim, are a problem, but it seems like they are not necessarily a problem. Most of the poskim say that even if the owner of the land did not relinquish ownership, even if the owner of the land did some things that they weren't supposed to do during the Shmita, that in and of itself doesn't make the produce prohibited. So those are possible problems, but which we paskin are okay. But then we have four other problems. The first is sfichim. I'll explain what sfichim are in a moment. That is regarding vegetables, not fruit, and I'll explain. Then Sfichim, yes, it's Samech, Pei, Chet, Yud, and then either Mem Sofit or Nun Sofit. Sometimes it's spelled with a Mem Sofit, sometimes with a Mem Sofit. Then there are three other problems that have to do with the very act of having commerce in relation to produce of Shmita, and that is there seems to be a prohibition of the money of that one pays for the produce of Shmita becomes holy as well, and it's not clear that we could give that money to anyone. So that might be one limitation, which I'm going to discuss. Another one is it is not the very act of selling and buying produce of Shmita might be prohibited as well. We'll discuss that. And in addition to buying, even if we manage to find a way around that, the act of measuring, weighing, counting produce during the act of selling might be a problem to itself. And we will discuss that as well. So let's start with Sfichim and what is the problem. So the Torah tells us what does that mean? So Rabbi Akiva holds that vegetables that grew during Shmita are not Torah. So anything that was planted during Shmita, according to Rabbi Akiva, and is not allowed to be consumed during Shmita, or maybe even after, it depends. But so vegetables that were sowed or planted during Shmita are not allowed to be consumed midoraita from the Torah, according to Rabbi Akiva. Chachamim, the rabbis in the Mishnah, don't agree. They say yes, there is such halacha, but it's not from the Torah. It's a rabbinic prohibition. Why? What's the purpose of this rabbinic prohibition? The purpose is simple. When it comes to fruit grow on the tree. So no one is going to plant fruit that are going to be eaten this year. But vegetables, every year we plant new vegetables. Now, during Shmita, vegetables were not planted. That means that this farmer is not going to have vegetables. Or even a person in their household, they have a little vegetable garden. Every day they go out and they pick their cucumbers and tomatoes. And what are they going to do this year? There are no cucumbers and tomatoes. So what are they going to eat? So they're going to plant. And then someone will come and say, how do you have cucumbers and vegetables this year in your garden? Isn't it not Shmita? And they would say, well, yes, it is. But last year, probably the seeds from last year fell into our garden. And this year, we were lucky. Plants grew. So we're eating those plants. Said the rabbis, you know what? You're not allowed to eat even those plants. Meaning even plants that you didn't plant yourself, that grew because last year's seeds somehow spilled, and this year they grew by themselves, you're not allowed to eat. So vegetables that grew during Shmita, say the rabbis, are not allowed to be consumed, period. Regardless planted or whether it's seeds from last year that fell and now they grew from themselves. So that means that vegetables that are the produce of Shmita cannot be consumed in any way. What does that mean? That when we go to the market and we see vegetables, then just a minute, are these vegetables from Shmita or are they not from Shmita? So first of all, what does it mean that it's from Shmita? When do we say this vegetable? Let's say we had a tomato, it was nice, beautiful, red before Rosh Hashanah, came Rosh Hashanah of Shmita, now it's Shmita, and now I pick it. Is it considered a vegetable of Shmita? No, it is not. Why? Because it grew before Shmita. Furthermore, there are different opinions, but we paskin like the most lenient, the Rosh, who says that it's enough that the plant itself began to, lachnot, to sprout, thank you. It just began to sprout before Rosh Hashanah. It is not considered that this plant grew on Shmita. Meaning the vegetable itself can be 100% a product of the Shmita, as long as the bush which it is growing on, the plant which it is growing on, was in this world before Shmita, meaning it began to sprout, it's not considered of Shmita, and it's considered okay to eat on Shmita. But when we go to the store, we don't always know. How do we know when is this vegetable from? This tomato, is it last year's or is it this year's? How do we know? We'll figure that out in a moment, but that is problem number one. Problem number one are vegetables, because vegetables that grew on the Shmita are not allowed to be consumed. So that's problem number one. Now, as part of the solution, so I already want to give some of the details of Sfichim, and that is this prohibition. We hold that it's a rabbinic prohibition. We don't hold like Rabbi Akiva that it's a Torah prohibition. This prohibition applies only in what we call the parts of Eretz Yisrael of Olei Bavel, not the parts of Olei Mitzrayim. What does that mean? When the children of Israel first came into Eretz Yisrael during the days of Yoshua, slowly they conquered the land of Israel, and slowly they conquered more and more and more, and they conquered more or less the parts that we hold on today, including parts of what is today Lebanon, including what is today Jordan. All of those parts were Eretz Yisrael those years. That is Olei Mitzrayim. Then the temple was destroyed. We went on Galut. We came back from Bavel. When we came back from Bavel, mainly with Ezra and Nehemiah, then we settled, but in a smaller area, and that is called Olei Bavel. When Chazal prohibited vegetables, they didn't prohibit it in the whole of Eretz Yisrael, but in the parts that were then occupied, which were Olei Bavel. So that means that many parts of even what we have today are, as Israel, vegetables that grew there are okay. What are those parts? The parts that are for sure, no question, are not in the park. So, for instance, when we were in Gush Katif was considered vegetables that grew there would have been okay. Arava, or what was called Arava Dromit, Eilat, that and the area surrounding that up until the Negev, that is also vegetables that grow there are okay. Okay. Now there is a question regarding flowers, whether sfichim is only vegetables which we eat, or also other growing produce, which is 1 year, which are like vegetables. They grow from seeds, and then next year you need a new thing altogether. So therefore, when we buy flowers on Shmita, if we want to buy flowers that don't actually have a hechsher, then we should buy like roses or flowers of that type that are not that grow on bushes that are not a one year bush. Flowers that grow 1 year, then if they have smell, it is more like that to them. Don't smell, then according to most opinions, sfichim don't apply to, but it's better to buy flowers that either have are roses, etc., or if they're not, then there are places where you'd have a hechsher on the flowers that we'll soon discuss what it means, are matzah menutak, meaning they were grown in pots in greenhouses. So Shmita, that's a way around Shmita, or something like that. We'll discuss it in a moment. Okay, so that is sfichim, and that is an issue, a challenge when we go out shopping. Another one is Dmei Shvi'it le'am ha'aretz, it's called. Okay, there is a very interesting halacha, and that is when we go and buy produce that is Shmita produce, then the produce is kadosh b'kedushat shvi'it. It's holy, right? I mentioned it in the first talk, and we will not next week, the week afterwards, when we'll talk about handling the food in the kitchen. Then we'll talk what does it mean? What are the ramifications of it being holy? But it is holy. Now, when we buy it from the shop, then the Torah tells us not only are the fruit holy, but also the money that was used to buy them is also holy. Now, that is different from Maasot, for instance. If we, or with Maaser Sheni, for instance, when we take the Maaser and we pay for it, or we do an exchange, and we want the holiness to exchange to the other, then it leaves the produce and goes to the money, right? Let's say we have Maaser Sheni, and we can't bring it to Yerushalayim. It needs to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Then what was it done during those days when they brought the Maaser Sheni to Yerushalayim? They would transfer it to a matbea. By the way, we do it today as well, but then we destroy the matbea because there's nothing we could do with it. But the holiness goes from the fruit, from the produce to the money. With Shmita, it doesn't work that way. When you have an exchange, the holiness remains with the fruit, but it goes also to the coins. Why is that? Because the of Shmita, there is something fundamental about it, and that is that unlike Maaser Sheni, which is not inherently holy, meaning Maaser Sheni is holy in the sense that we should go and eat it in Yerushalayim. But it's not if you don't want to eat this fruit, okay, take a different fruit instead and say, this is your Maaser Sheni, and take that. But the produce of Shmita is seen to be inherent holy. So that holiness does go away. So that's why when you pay for it with money, both the money and the produce become holy. Now, the produce is inherently holy and therefore is always holy. The money which you paid for it, since it is not inherently holy, it just became holy because you paid for Shemitah with it. Therefore, go on and exchange it for other things. Its holiness jumps from one thing to another. So let's say you went with this money and you bought fish with the money. Now the money is not holy anymore, but the fish that you bought is holy. And then if you went and you exchanged the fish for a piece of meat, now the meat became holy, the fish is not holy anymore. Okay, that is just that we understand the way it works. But the bottom line is the money we pay for the Shemitah is holy. And the halakha is we can't give that holy money to anyone. We are allowed to give it only to someone who we know is going to be careful to do with this money only what is allowed to be done with this money. What is allowed to be with this money? So there are two things regarding this money. A, when comes Sh'at Habi'ul, it's also something I discussed during our first talk. That is when a certain type of produce is not in the market anymore. It's not its season anymore. Then I have to be mafir whatever of it I have. Let's say oranges grow during the winter. There is gone. No oranges in the market anymore, in the field anymore. Then I have to the oranges that if I happen to still have oranges at home, I have to take them out and put them outside for anyone to take it. Do you remember I also said then you're allowed to take it back in, and because anyone could take it. You are anyone, so you can take it as well. But you have to do that. So you have to do it also with the money. And a person that doesn't know that won't know to do it with the money. That's number one. Number two, you are allowed to buy only food with that holy money. You're not allowed to buy other things. Why? Because Shmita, the Torah says that it is for you to consume, to eat. So even if we exchange it for money, also that money needs to be used over on food. And that person might not know that it has to be used on food. He will use it on a car. The car will end up in 10 years in a pile of metal somewhere. And what are we going to do with that? Okay. So therefore, for those reasons, that is a problem. So when we go to the market and we buy produce of Shemitah, we pay for it. We gave money to a person who might not know how to handle it, and that's a problem. Okay. The next problem is an even more fundamental problem. Who said there might be a prohibition to even sell and buy produce of Shemitah. The pasuk says, "Le'ochla, v'haya lechem le'ochla." You should have it, or you and anyone else, meaning not only the farmer, but you relinquish your own, and anyone is allowed to come and take it for eating it. Eating means consuming, and Chazal say le'ochla velo l'schoa, meaning I cannot say my neighbor farmer, now his field is hefker. I'll take my my, how do you call that? Sorry? No, something that, no, not my plow, whatever harvest. I'll pick the whole thing. Sorry? Yes, I'll take the whole crop. I'll take it to the market. I'll sell it, and I'll make a lot of money off my farmer neighbor. Says the Torah, no, you're not allowed to do it. When you take whatever you take, or even the farmer himself could say, look, it's hefker. Anyone can take, but I'll take it, and I'll take it to the market, and I'll sell it. No, you can't do it. It's for people to take for household use only, not for commerce purposes. So you're not allowed to have commerce with Peirot Shmita. That's one understanding. The Rambam has slightly a different understanding. The Rambam says, no, you are allowed to sell Peirot Shmita because otherwise it won't get to anyone. Only people who are close to the fields can take it. Anyone can take it. What you're not allowed to is to have more than one sale. Meaning, if I harvest and I take it to the market and I sell it there, that's fine. But if I sell it to someone who's now going to sell it, that's already having commerce. Meaning, making one sale, that's not commerce. That's just taking it to the market, allowing more people to have it. But more than once, that's already having commerce according to the Rambam. But either way, when I go to the supermarket usually didn't buy it directly from the farmer. They probably bought it from the wholesaler who bought it from the farmer. So that's already a problem because I'm buying it from someone who bought it from someone, and that is commerce with Peirot Shmita. According to the Rambam? No, so the Rambam understands le'ochla velo l'schora means either you or someone who buys it from you will eat it, but not for making commerce. Meaning I'm allowed to buy it to eat it, but I'm not allowed to buy it to sell it onwards. That's how the Rambam understands it. So you're not allowed to, but whether it's the Rambam or the other understanding says you're not allowed to have commerce at all. The Rambam says you're allowed to sell it once, but that's it. But either way, it's the problem. He does learn it, but slightly different. Yes. That's how the Rambam understands it. So now, the problem. Okay. Now let's say, and soon we'll see. Let's say we managed to get around the problem of selling. We somehow got around it, but there is still a problem of measuring Peirot Shmita, Medida. The Chazal say that even if in cases where you are allowed to sell, you are not allowed to sell it by weight or by number. Why? So this comes back to there are a few explanations, but basically the gist of it is that it comes back to the idea that we relinquish our ownership during Shmita. So let's say even if I take it to the market and I sell it, then, and let's say according to the Rambam that one sell is allowed, then that is seen more, it's not like I'm doing business, it's more I'm charging business, right? Because not everyone are here at the field. So I'm taking it to the market. And for that work, I'm asking for money. But if I'm starting to weigh the fruit, then I treat them as they're mine. That's already a problem. You're not charging for your work. You're charging more for the produce. That's already more of a problem. So weighing, measuring is a problem when it's done in the context of selling. Okay, so these are the problems. Vegetables, sfichim, you're not allowed to have vegetables, and making three problems that we have with buying itself, and that is, first of all, it's not so simple that we're allowed to even buy. and handing money holy that now becomes holy to someone that don't know what we'll do with it is a problem. And weighing or measure or counting fruits, produce of Shmita is a problem. So how do we overcome all these problems? So one solution is called Otzar Beitin. This is an ancient solution. It's mentioned already in the Tosefta. Even those days, not everyone lived in the country. So not everyone had access to produce. What do? Beitin used to send their people out to the fields that used to harvest it, bring it to the market, and Beitin will charge and pay whatever these workers would make. Beitin would charge and pay them, and that was a good deal for everyone, because that way at least some of the produce gets to more people than they don't have to go wandering outside to the fields to find it. And now there is a question, because the Torah doesn't allow us to harvest. The Torah allows to harvest only on small scale when we take it to our household. So how Beitin are allowed to do it? So there are all kinds of answers for that. One very simple answer is, why am I allowed to only do it on a small scale? Because if it's not on a small scale, then I'm doing it that's already for commercial purposes. So that's a problem. But Beitin are not doing it for commercial purposes. They're doing it as a service to everyone. So Beitin, when they come and harvest on a large scale, because they are the representatives of the people, they're distributing it to the people, only paying the workers for the work they did. Then they're allowed to do it even on a large scale, because it's just to give it to the people. So that was an ancient thing that is mentioned in the Mishnah. Even the Rambam mentioned it in his halachot, and it's not clear why. Some hold, maybe the Rambam held that this is not la halacha. Some say yes, some say no. But Rav Kook in Shnat Taf Reish Ayin. What is that? What is that in? I didn't have time to look it up. What it was in non-Jewish years. Taf Reish Ayin. 1910. Does that make maybe? Let's see. Tafshin was 40, so 30 years. Yes, brilliant. 1910. Thank you. So, what? Oh yeah. Okay. So I tell me later. So 1910, Rav Kook was the Shnat Shmita. And apparently now we know it was 1910. So Rav Kook suggested to bring back this Otzar Beitin. It was done on a very small scale, but later on in Tafshin Hey, that's 45, 1945. Yes, 1945. It was suggested again. It was brought up again by the Chazon Ish this time. Now, in today's setting, it's very difficult, because we're talking about fruit. There are many things you're not allowed to do. Farmers are not allowed to do in the field. So the produce is not really so good, and the bureaucracy that it takes to make sure that it's done right, and that to find the workers that will do it, etc., all of that. It ends up, it's very expensive, and there is no way of knowing that there will be enough demand in the market for such produce, which is not good quality and not necessarily cheaper than other produce. So farmers are not sure they want to be part of this scheme to begin with. So it's a bit problematic. But in places like Chafetz Chaim and other places, there were and there still are farmers that are part of this scheme. It's called Otzar Beitin. That is the first type of solution, but it helps only for fruit, not for vegetables, because vegetables are sfichin, as we saw before. Next thing, and that is for vegetables as well, is what is called matzah menutak bechamamot. Do you remember when I spoke about pots in homes, then I said that is not considered a field. There are two criteria which the Torah says. V'shavta ha'aretz, the land should rest, and sadcha lo tizra, the field, you shouldn't work your field. But what if it's not the land, it's not the field? So what makes it not a field? So a field doesn't have a roof. So let's say it's under a roof. That's what the Yerushalmi says, the Talmud Yerushalmi. And let's say what makes it not the land, if it's not in the land, if it's in a pot. So let's say you have plants in pots under a roof, they're not considered part of the land or the or a field, and therefore Shmita won't apply there. So came up some with a solution. Let's have big greenhouses, that's a roof, right? Under a roof, and put layers of plastic on the ground and put soil on top of that and grow it. So the soil directly on the plastic, some said is okay, but many said it's not. So they said, okay, let's put on top of the plastic, we'll put pots, and it will be it would grow in pots. That's not part of the land. It's not might be okay. So that's solution. Matzah menutak, according to most poskim, shvi'it won't apply indeed to that produce, and it's therefore a good idea. So that's a way to grow vegetables also during Shnat Shmita. A third solution is if it grew in a field that belongs to a non-Jew and that was worked by a non-Jew. Shmita doesn't apply to a non-Jew according to most opinions. There are others. According to most opinions, it doesn't apply, and therefore, and he for sure is allowed to sell it, allowed to do everything. So therefore, that is another solution. And the fourth solution is heter mechira, selling the land, the Jewish land, to a non-Jew. So it's similar. We said before that if it belongs to a non-Jew and the non-Jew does the work, it is okay. So let's sell like we sell the chametz on Pesach, let's sell our fields to a non-Jew, and the non-Jew would do the work, or other non-Jews would do the work, and therefore we could do everything. That is the fourth solution. Now so it's beitin I discussed, matzah menutak I discussed. Okay. Do
you have to sell the land, or can you just sell the fruit that's going to become?
No, you have to sell the land. The fruit you cannot sell, because once the land belongs to you, you must relinquish ownership of the fruit.
No,
right? Before Shmita, then no, because halachically you cannot sell produce before it comes. Yes. So that's a problem. Okay. So we have problems, we have solutions. Now let's try and link them together in the next 7 minutes. Or 5. During the first few months of Shmita, there isn't a problem. Why there isn't a problem? All fruit are still fruit of last year. Right? Even if I picked it during Shmita, if the fruit was, let's say I pick an orange during Shmita, if that orange was somewhat edible before Shmita, even though it wasn't ripe, but it was somewhat edible before Shmita, then it's still okay. So the first 3 months or so of Shmita, there is no problem. Fruits are okay. Vegetables are also okay then, because whatever vegetables we have in the market, then they definitely sprout before Shmita, so they're okay. They're okay, but they have kedushat shvi'i, because vegetables, unlike fruit, if they were picked during Shmita, they have kedushat shvi'i. They have kedushat shvi'i, and they need to be treated as such. We'll discuss how we have to treat them next next week. And fruit during the year after the first few months, then they began slowly becoming problematic. Each fruit during its time. So now I want to mention something. There is what is called Luchot Shmita or Luchot Shvi'it. These are, just a minute, this is, yes. I have. Okay, so these are luchot. These are charts that tell us the season of the different fruits and vegetables. So we should know when vegetables are already obsolete, meaning tomatoes until X. Okay, until this time we can assume quite fairly that all tomatoes in the market sprouted before Rosh Hashanah and therefore are okay. From this time onwards, it's already problematic. You shouldn't buy tomatoes with that you don't know that are matzah menutak, etc., etc. We'll discuss that in a moment. The same with fruit, but with fruit is not that you shouldn't buy, but when is it kadosh b'kedushat shmita? So let's say oranges until mid tevet don't have shvi'it because they're still considered oranges of last year. From mid tevet, they're already they weren't edible when Rosh Hashanah came, and therefore they're considered of this year, and you are not, and you have to treat them as kedushat shvi'it. So there are charts. You could pick them up in many places. You could find them online. You could find them in many places. The vegetables, though, that once they're sfichim is a real problem. Then what do we do? Once vegetables are sfichim, then we should prefer matzah menutak, meaning those that were under a chamama or under a greenhouse in pots, or yeah, that's that solution. The other solution of buying from non-Jewish people is very problematic. There's a lot of controversy around that, because from one Shmita to another, they occupy more and more land, and there are a lot of parts of Eretz Yisrael where there is a lot of tension between the Jewish farmers and the non-Jewish farmers, and it's not necessarily such a good idea that because of Shmita, which is supposed to one of the things that we keep of our land, we might be giving our neighbors an incentive to take away one of the ideas of Tzionut was that we take ownership of our land, that we farm our own land, not that we give it to others to do it for us. And this might work against it, and there are other issues and problems with it. There is a very, very harsh letter of Kook. Let's see if I could find it. Yes. No, not this. I can't, never mind. I can't find it now. I'll try and find a copy for you for next week. So the best solution is matzah menutak for vegetables. What is called that's in the greenhouses in pots, and heter mechira. What is heter mechira? I'm not going to discuss today because I'm going to discuss it next week. Heter mechira, there are those who say it doesn't work for various reasons, but the past few Shmitot, it was done in such a way that answers most of the objections of most of those that were against the Heter Mechira had. We'll discuss it next week. It's done in a way that that overcomes those objections, and therefore it still works. The main objection against Heter Mechira, or one of the main objections, are that it circumvents the whole Shmita altogether, meaning it's a way of not keeping Shmita, because and we should try and somehow keep Shmita. So with the other solutions, we are with maybe Matzah Menutak and others. So with this specifically, Matzah Menutak is not keeping Shmita, but at least we try to buy fruits from Otzbeitin maybe, or other places. We try to treat them with Kedushat Shvi'it, and at least we try to find other ways of keeping Shmita. When Heter Mechira is a way of we might not have no choice, so we circumvent it, but it's not the preferable way. Oh, is that? Oh, where we should go? I guess we're okay. So that was today's shiur, by the way. So that finishes. I guess -2. Yeah. Okay. So.
Thank you very much.